Now, again, white boomers have the right to have a mass therapy session about the fact that Donald Trump won. But to call it a no kings protest, to act like he is a king, is so utterly preposterous.
Sarah Seidner was filling in for Abby Phillip on her CNN show recently, and she had a panel on that included MAGA pundits Pete Seat and Batya Ungar-Sargon. And they were on to talk a little bit about the No Kings rally and the Trump meme and issues around that. Of course, these No Kings rallies, which 7 million Americans turned out to exercise their First Amendment right to protest, transpired peacefully, despite the setup that Republican politicians like MAGA Mike Johnson were saying was pro-Hamas and, funded by Soros. These are communist, Antifa, American-hating terrorists, and there's going to be violence. And none of that turned out to be true. Shocker. So what do you think? Will the MAGA pundits admit that they were wrong, or will they pivot and twist themselves into logic pretzels like they always do? I'm not going to spoil it for you. Why don't we check it out together? I'll have my opinions, and then I want to know what you think in the comments.
The Trump administration is dumping on Americans expressing their First Amendment rights, and an AI video he posted shows just how filthy Trump's willing to go against those who oppose him. A warning now, in case you haven't finished your dinner. Trump posted this AI video to social media featuring himself. You see him there wearing a crown, flying a fighter jet, and then you see that. It appears that he is dropping feces on protesters marching in the No Kings rallies over the weekend. An estimated 7 million people showed up to those rallies, and there were about 2,000 demonstrations held across the country. But it wasn't just the president doing the crap slinging. His vice president posting this fake video showing Democratic leaders bowing to Trump, who has a crown on, holding a sword there. The White House mocked Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer with this little video or pictures put out. So did the Transportation Department, by the way, putting this out. Trump's communication director took a jab at Kamala Harris's husband with this. And these are the people that Americans are paying to run the government, which, by the way, as you know, is still shut down. And when confronted with Trump's sewage bomb, here's how the Republican Speaker of the House tried to spin it.
The president uses social media to make a point. You can argue he's probably the most effective person who's ever used social media for that. He is using satire to make a point.
Satire. Donald Trump couldn't define satire. If a reporter asked Donald Trump to define satire, he wouldn't know how to do it. You tell me if you think that's not realistic. Any more than Donald Trump could fly a fighter jet, any more than Donald Trump could ride a bicycle, right? I can't imagine any of those things being possible. And I think, as she said, is right on the money. These are the people we are paying to run our government, or as the case may be right now, not run it. It's shut down.
All right, we've got our great panel here. Let's start with you, Pete Seat. You're so lucky you're in the hot seat. The president is supposed to be the president for all Americans. Why is this okay?
Well, they're calling it what it is, and that is a partisan charade. It is being completely overblown. Let me back up for a second. The very same people who mocked Donald Trump for his fixation on crowd sizes, saying it was indicative of absolutely nothing, want us to focus on the fact that 98% of Americans had nothing to do with these protests over the weekend. They want to overblow this and exaggerate it and make it sound like it is a massive wave against Donald Trump. What it is a Democrat Party stunt, one that was co-sponsored by the Communist Party of America. It is on the flyer, their logo. That should be disavowed. It should have never been allowed on the flyer to begin with. So the Speaker of the House, I don't agree with all of his language that he's using to describe this, but they're pointing out what it is, and that is just a bunch of partisan politics. If Joe Biden was president, these people wouldn't give a darn.
Do you think that if Joe Biden was president and he posted that video of Republicans who were out there expressing their rights with it dumping crap on their
I don't like a lot of the social media that Donald Trump puts out there. He's trolling. You can agree or disagree with the trolling, but it is his style of communicating. He seems to enjoy it, and a lot of his supporters do. I don't.
What do you think about this, Keith? As you hear, the responses from Republicans have been like, oh, he's trolling. Oh, he's joking. Oh, this is not a serious protest, even though there were some 7 million people out there.
Where does it end? What are we doing here? I mean, I was at the protest on Saturday in New York City. It was entirely peaceful. There were 100,000 people or so who were there down 7th Avenue in Manhattan. And there were millions of people at other protests across the country. No, it wasn't the entire population, but even when Dr. King led his marches, there were only a small fragment of the black community who was there. But it was a representation of the power of the people standing up against their government. People have busy lives, and they took time out of their lives to do that. And then to have the President of the United States figuratively crap on them for expressing their right to free speech is an affront to democracy. It's not only juvenile and immature, it's a reflection of where we are as a country today.
But I think Sarah Seidener is right on when she says the president is supposed to be the president of all Americans, right? I mean, you can talk about the crassness and whether or not you like it and know that's just his style and don't make a big deal out of it, which I think is kind of the height of hypocrisy. And Pete Seat, who looks like a cartoon, neighbor of Elmer Fudd's come to life. I mean, this guy, they literally look like clowns, some of them. And Pete Seat is one of those, in my opinion. I think the bottom line here is really that Donald Trump, if you glaze him and support him, then you're an American. And if you don't, you are Antifa, which is a terrorist organization, right? That's what he's lining up. Is that if you don't agree with him, you are an enemy. You are an opponent. And that is the leader of America. That's fundamentally un-American.
On top of all that, then you have Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and other people in the Republican Party saying this is okay because it's just Trump being Trump. Well, last week they were saying it was okay for 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds to make racist comments about Nazis and stuff like that. But now we have the President of the United States literally attacking a 23-year-old, Harry Sisson, dumping crap on him. And that's okay, because that's fair game. But, when the Republicans are doing and they're calling each other Nazis, they're just kids. This is just a reflection of the hypocrisy of the Republican Party.
Yes, precisely. I think Keith Poyen makes some great points here. The real story here, and I find myself mildly disappointed that Scott Jennings is not on here for me to shred apart in this episode. Because he really plays into this same stuff that Mike Johnson is saying, which, by the way, Mike Johnson, I think if there is a cake, Mike Johnson takes it. The crap he is having to eat these days to try and logic pretzel his way around how somehow this shutdown is the Democrats' fault and everything would be going great if it wasn't for the Democrats when they control all three branches of the government. But, this language that they use, that these rallies are funded by Hamas and, the communists are right on the poster and it shouldn't be allowed in America. Scott Jennings was saying, these people are violent. And this is language that Mike Johnson has echoed. I went to a No Kings protest and it was great. Like, it was really inspiring, and people had the most amazing, funny signs. But it was a buoyant, we can do it kind of spirit. There was nothing violent or anti-American feeling about it in any way, shape, or form. And there was just an enormous, overwhelming positivity. And Donald Trump posting this AI video, I'm sure he didn't create it. One of his little lick spittles did, and he thinks it's hilarious. But the meanness and just the race to the bottom, it's literally poop he's dumping on people. And that smug smirk of his, that's it to a T. That's the core. And these people have all lined up. They've abandoned any sense of, we need to make lives better for Americans, and it's all just about shilling for this troll. They say he's trolling. The White House is occupied by a troll. We have elected a troll to be president of the United States. I mean, you can say it in a bunch of different ways, but that's the That's the bottom line. Can you imagine Obama posting something like this? However you feel about Barack Obama as a president, he carried himself in a way that was presidential, right? He led by example. He set a tone. And again, you can pick apart whatever policies you want, but that's how government works. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to argue in good faith about the best way to go about accomplishing making life better for all Americans. None of that's happening with this goon. And, I think the Pete Seats of the world are smart enough to understand that. Not that you'll ever hear them admit it.
All old enough to remember when Hillary Clinton used the deplorables comment, said that half of the people that support Donald Trump were part of this basket of deplorables, and Republicans went crazy, condemning her. To this day, they still do it. So why are Republicans covering for Trump when he does something like this, saying these people are a joke, they're not indicative of America? And then he has this video.
Well, I want to start by saying I totally support the protests. I think that this is, a very important part of what it means to be an American is to raise up your voice in any form that you wish. We have these First Amendment rights, and they are precious and dear. I also think that this was not indicative or representative even of the mainstream Democratic Party. These protests were overwhelmingly white. They were overwhelmingly elderly people, older people. Now, again, white boomers have the right to have a mass therapy session about the fact that Donald Trump won. But to call it a no kings protest, to act like he is a king, is so utterly preposterous. This is a man who won the popular vote. He won every swing state. He is a person who is enacting the exact agenda he promised he was going to enact while he was campaigning. And so what they're actually protesting is the absolute perfection of American democracy, where a person campaigned on an agenda, won the popular vote, and is now enacting that agenda. So it was actually a protest of democracy, all of which is to say the only way to greet such a preposterous proposition, calling this a no kings rally when it's actually an anti-democracy rally, is to crap on it. I'm sorry, is to basically make fun of it. And I think that has been the Trump administration's approach. They didn't try to stop it, God forbid, because he's not a king. They allowed them to have their say. They allowed them to go out there, and then they made fun of them.
Wow, that is quite a few dots connected by Batya Ungar-Sargon. So this was an exercise, which is it? Is it just a bunch of disgruntled 7 million, by the way? He said, the headline, Pete Seat said the headline was 98% of Americans didn't go out and protest in the streets. 7 million Americans did. That's just absurd. Half of the country doesn't vote. So you can't say, everybody wanted this. This is what literally everybody voted for, and that's democracy. Half the people didn't vote, first of all. It's just absolutely up is down, left is right, and it threads itself through the needle of its own eye and then back out its own butthole and then twice around and in one ear and out the nose. It's just, do you hear yourself? Do you think anybody's even following this absurd, this insane logic? People hate what's happening right now. Hate it. 7 million people taking to the streets on a single day is one of the largest, if not the largest, mass protests in modern American history. It's just, farmers hate what's going on. Ranchers hate what's going on. Look at the polling. Just Google up whatever polling Trump's approval rating is right now. People hate what this administration is doing across the board. And comments like hers ignore all of that. I mean, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, are you just insane? Like, are you so deep in this bubble that, you talk to the same 12 people and they all agree with you and you just think, let them eat cake? Like, what's the problem here? Or have they just been paid well enough and they practiced it enough that they kind of drink their own Kool-Aid and it's soaked into their brain now, and they're just kind of like, this is fine. I mean, I can lie straight ahead like this, and whatever. It's just, kind of a fundamentally nihilistic thing.
How do you respond to her argument?
Yeah, first off, it was the largest protest, I believe, in history, right? We never have protests that are the entire population of America. So it was the largest protest. And there's a reason why people are protesting, which is that Trump has not delivered on the stuff he campaigned on. Trump campaigned on lowering the cost of living, on bringing manufacturing back to America, on rebuilding people's means of making a living. And he has failed on those fronts. The only thing that he has done is he has weaponized the U.S. government to go after his political opponents. And that's what people are upset about. That's why it is bringing mainstream people out. I was out in San Francisco, and we marched a few miles. It wasn't old people doing that march. It was people from all walks of life, all races, all ages.
Right. So, I mean, just to call this out again, before the protest happened from Mike Johnson and people like Scott Jennings, these are pro-Hamas, hate America rallies. And buckle up, everybody, because we're expecting it to be a bloodbath. And now that it happened and it was peaceful, you got right-wingers like Bhatia Sargon on this show saying, well, it's just a bunch of, kind of pathetic old white boomers, crying over the fact that they don't like Donald Trump. And they paint it like it's a handful of people. 7 million Americans. Sure, that may be 2% of the country, but that's an enormous turnout. And we see people like our Democratic leaders now coming out to the program. They did no kings over the summer, but we weren't seeing the Chuck Schumers and the faces of the party out there a part of it in the way that we are this time. And that matters, not because I think that they are necessarily great leaders, but it indicates a momentum and a groundswell, and it doesn't take a lot. Like, if we are willing to make our voices heard, change does start to happen. And even the MAGA shills like Mike Johnson are sensitive to the direction that wind is blowing. You see a lot of videos about how the rats are starting to glance around the ship and they're looking for the nearest exit because they're starting to sense that this might not be a winner, right? Being on the right might not be the winning thing. And you certainly see Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you can talk about why we've seen this sort of shift in Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene comes off as a complete moron, but I also, in the same breath, will say she's no dummy. Like, she's a savvy enough politician. I think she's despicable. Some of the stuff that she says, it's absolutely despicable. But you can say, oh, well, her adult daughter and blah, 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 healthcare. I see a woman who has got very sensitive radar for which way the wind is going. And I think she's decided this is doomed. And she's going to try and pivot now so she can later say, well, I was one of the people that stopped supporting it early. That's politicians for you. So I think things like these protests do make a concrete difference, especially if they must stay peaceful. They absolutely must remain peaceful. Violence is what these autocrats and ICE, and that's what they are amassing. And they're trying to get the military on their side, and they funded ICE to this incredible degree. They are hoping a protester throws a brick so they can open fire. They're out provoking a violent response that we must not give them. It doesn't solve anything, and it gives them the excuse they need to unleash military violence against American citizens and blame it on Antifa, narco-terrorists, the radical left, George Soros, Hamas, whatever, Marxist, communist. I mean, it's all these terms all blend together. And in fact, the potpourri of it works to their advantage because it makes it sound like there's a variety of different enemies, but they're just talking about anybody that doesn't fall in line. That's totalitarianism, right? And that's why it's called No Kings. I mean, Donald Trump, I will grudgingly give him, as ham-handed as it is, he's got a brand sense, right? Those catchy nicknames, they are sticky that he comes up with. They are sticky. And No Kings it's great branding. It's nice and sticky. I wouldn't say that Donald Trump is a king. I'd say he's an authoritarian. And he's, got his people in the Supreme Court, and he's got half the government. walking in lockstep behind him. And this is a downward slide into authoritarianism driven by a playbook written by the Heritage Foundation that's called Project 2025. And the Rust votes are executing it. I won't do this whole spiel again. I know you see all these things, but that's why it's called No Kings, is we want a democracy where everybody is working together in good faith. Now, I think it's corrupt and it's broken, and we need to really start at the state and even city and township level and make sure that our governments right where we live are exercising integrity and reflecting legislation that we want to see. I think that does work its way upward until we can pass legislation that will rid the corruption from our national government. And hopefully we can elect people of integrity that will genuinely work together, not to forward the interests of major corporations and oligarchs and billionaires, but making life better for all American citizens. Anyway, No Kings, baby. Did any of you go to the No Kings protests? What am I missing here? Well, chime in the comments.